I'm the director of the Center for Colorado Women's History. I know there'll be lots of time for discussion and talk. Before we begin any program for History Colorado, we start with a land acknowledgement. So I'm going to read that for us tonight. In the spirit of healing, we begin each event at History Colorado with a reading of our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land currently known as Colorado has been the traditional homelands of indigenous people since time immemorial. We are grateful to work in partnership with the 48 sovereign nations who continue to call this land home. Together, we plan exhibits, collect, preserve, and interpret artifacts, do archaeological work, and create educational programs to share the history of Colorado. Thank you for joining us tonight. I think you all know Chloé. I'll let her continue, but before we leave tonight, Kat and I are here. Janan, who's a fellow with us, is here, and any of us are able to answer questions about the work that we do. We encourage you to come back for tours. Our new exhibit begins at the end of this month. The exhibit is called Rumors of Bloomers. And just lots of really great things happening here, celebrating the stories of women in Colorado.
I'm loving this energy in this room. Yes. Thank you all for however you show up tonight. I am just happy that you showed up tonight and want to share this time with us. So I will say, first of all, many thanks to Susan and Kat and Janan and Margot and the beautiful team here. You have a group of humans who are actively working every day to include the stories of all women. And that is significant, even though it sounds like something so small, because it has not always been the case, right? So the work that they are doing is so in alignment with the work that we are doing through Duplessis Art, that the funny thing is, when we came to meet Susan a few months ago, we didn't even come to share or suggest the prayer closet. We came to talk about Cafe Williams, because at the time I just finished hosting a period room series at the Trinidad History Museum, where we've been largely, most of you know, for about 10 months serving and creating programming. Excuse me. So we came to discuss potentially Cafe coming here, that beautiful period room, the dress, all the things to honor the only known female Buffalo soldier. And when we got to the second floor of this house, where we'll be going shortly, we're listening to the tour, we're engaging with Kat and Margot and Janan and Susan, and literally, I felt like something was asking me to face the wall. Which sounds creepy. It wasn't creepy. You know, as a creative, oftentimes we reconcile a lot of things. Something that said, look over here. And as they're talking about the house, I turned and I said, why are there stairs to that closet? Is there a second floor? Like, what's that situation? And they were just like, oh, that's a prayer closet. And then kept talking, and I was like, wait. Let's get off the bus. I was like, wait, a prayer closet, what? And they were like, yeah, the family that lived here was Methodist and deeply religious and like all the things. So I began, as they were talking, it was almost like this out-of-body experience. Like I'm hearing the words, but I'm thinking like, wait, when was it installed? How were they using it? All of these things began to just kind of stir in my spirit. So much so that once we finished the tour, we were back in this very room, sitting down, discussing potential opportunities to collaborate. And I said, I know we're talking about this and this, but what if I just came and just completely pimped out your prayer closet? And they were like, huh? And I said, let me explain. I am originally from the South. We had prayer closets. If you didn't have a closet to spare, you would create an ancestral wall, possibly where you had people who had transitioned, grandparents, loved ones on the wall. It was just the norm. Or maybe you had a small sacred space. Maybe there was a little altar, or maybe it was around a mantle. I said, I think a lot of times in our culture we minimize and normalize these things. But the beautiful thing is that no matter your ethnic background, your story, your experience, we all go through this motion of creating in certain seasons of life sacred spaces. Why? Because they're sacred. Because having that one space means that you have a place where you can be seen and heard on your own terms. Even in times of housing insecurity or transition, or maybe that space is your car, your garage. And in a really tough season, I've experienced with people when we do oral histories or we're engaging in doing community-based work, sometimes if you're on foot, that space has to be here, right? Within you. So no matter where you are, no matter the season or the decade or the era, there has always been this focus on creating a sacred space. And if you do it with an open heart, I believe that sacred spaces can create a sense of place. And that's when you transition and transform that area to something higher. So where we're sitting now is one of the rooms where they have, there's a piece directly behind, if you look, that piece was actually here, created by one of the ladies that lived in the house. Kat, was that Josephine? Or? Mm-hmm. Okay, yes, it's Josephine, who was an artist. Mm-hmm. Yes, I love it. So when we came into the space for that tour on that day, we were standing right there, and I literally turned and was like, what is this situation? Like, what's going on? So this was, take away all the flowers, the installation completely, it was just a closet, the door, right? So what's important about that is, we respectfully asked for permission to remove the door. Why? Because we firmly believe that when you are creating authentic community, there is no room for doors. So rather than take the door off and just move it to another area of the house, I sat and I was very mindful about how I could incorporate the door. So we'll talk a little bit about that in just a few minutes, but it's very intentional that it's here, that it's slightly off center, because when you blaze boldly into a space with everyone in mind, persons of all experiences and abilities, you take away the power of a door. So the prayer closet is this inspired rendition of what I feel sacred spaces should and can be for me. So we're gonna go on a journey. I'll go through the actual show. I will share for you that because it is a historic home on the National Historic Register, one of the really cool things about doing this installation was that we couldn't alter in any way the building. So much so that the original intention for this show, the first 15 sketches, involved 1,000 flowers. It was gorgeous. We were losing our minds about the intense beauty. I wanted people to walk in and just be like, oh, I can't even stand the beauty, right? Spring is here, I get it, I get all the things, surrender. So we shared this with Susan, and then we got an email shortly thereafter, and she was so kind and so loving, and she's like, yeah, so we can't do that, because along with beautiful flowers come cute little critters, potentially. Mm-hmm. And with this being a house of quite a great deal of significance, we couldn't take a chance on those critters making this home their home. Yeah. So, as many of us know as creators, sometimes when you have this idea in your head that simply has to be, you also have this notion that if it can't be that way, maybe it can't be, or maybe it has to be reimagined. Well, as a female and as a mom, I pride myself on a few things, but I do pride myself on being flexible. So I told Susan, let me pray on it and let me reimagine it. And I contacted Shannon and Dimitri and I said, I got it. We're going to make it. And they were like, what? I said, we're going to make the same installation by hand. And Shannon and I have often made paper and made journals for persons who were not feeling well or going through tough seasons just as gifts. It was just kind of a hobby. I said, Shannon, what if we make the flowers in paper? Can you do that? She's like, how many? I said, over 100. And if you know Shannon, then you know she was like, bet, let's do it. I was like, you're amazing. And then we said, Dimitri, we can't attach anything inside the closet. So can you create a frame, essentially a closet within a closet? And he was like, let's do it. So we came, they did a tour of the house, we did all the measurements, and we began shifting energy around it. And you know how sometimes your plan can be altered? So much so that you are like, I'm not nervous at all, I'm invigorated. Once we finished preparing all the flowers, I called Shanna and I said, why do I feel like this was always the plan? Because while nature's blooms are extraordinary, when you look at this piece, you should know that every single thing, with the exception of the belongings and artifacts, were created by hands. Additionally, we clocked about 65 hours creating everything for the show. There are exactly 300 flowers in this installation. We made about 400, but we stopped at 3 because I have this thing about 3s. It's a whole conversation. It's not, the day I was born, other things. So also for this exhibit, you see themes. You see things in threes for the Trinity. You also see this kind of gentle flow. It's meant to look as if you were praying, your prayers were answered, and the revelation is almost coming and like spilling out onto the floor. Because oftentimes when we look or question or request an answer, whether it's a belief in a higher power, you're looking out to the universe, or you're just asking literally out loud, where do I go from here? What do I do? How do I show up? You have to reserve space for the notion that sometimes the response that you get, it won't come in a box. It comes jagged sometimes. Sometimes there are holes punched in it. But in the spirit of reclaiming, if you know that you're always anchored and connected, then you also know that the plan, the updated, revised version of the plan, is sometimes exactly what it was supposed to be. So I'm deeply proud of this exhibit. I will tell you, if you have the opportunity to visit over the next several weeks during the daytime, one of the really cool things is, it's a different installation throughout the day. 10 o'clock in the morning, you have loads of beautiful, bright, natural light. You can see all the details in the flowers. Some of the flowers actually have small seeds in them that were preserved. Different petals are actually pressed into the paper flowers. The blue flowers were actually dyed with indigo. All of the fiber flowers that I did are burlap. They're all tattered and torn. No one is the same. Everyone was sheared in different ways. And they're meant to represent how we all shift and change in different seasons, for sure. But the strength of them maintains. They just change shape. So you actually have the netting coming down. I use netting whenever possible. I know that sounds strange, but to me, it represents kind of this beautiful tribute to the area of history that I studied the most on, and that would be the transatlantic slave trade. So in terms of themes and community, I'm always interested in exploring what it means to have big netting. So this is actually a huge commercial fishing net. And it's meant to represent the gathering up of things, of ideas, of energy, of people, right? Also, there are so many ties to Christianity too, if that's your belief system, discipleship, fishermen of men. So these themes are very consistent no matter the experience. And then it's torn at the very bottom, and you see a little small hole where you can actually see the candles inside. It's meant to represent the seasons of life where we're just looking for that space, right? We're looking for a little bit of room. And really cool things happen when you totally surrender. You acknowledge the notion that sometimes you don't have to look outside of you to have that room, that space. You can grant that to yourself with grace. The netting comes all the way down the stairs. Once I finish speaking, you're welcome to come up, you can touch it, you can see it. All we ask is that you just don't touch the pieces that have the layer of plastic underneath, because those are actual artifacts, but you're welcome to get close to it. And it's really a sweeping altar of sorts, very intentionally with this altar. It's to demonstrate that everything is not always full, right? There are some seasons where you start out, you're just like, this is gonna be my year, this is my season, it's robust, it's full. And child, before you get to March, you're just like, what happened? Can we get a do-over? And the reality is like, no, you can't get a do-over. That's where the shifting comes in. That's where you take that tough season and you're just like, how do I meld this? How do I mold this? How do I take paper and craft it, right? And create it, for sure. So you'll see the clock. I have clocks in my work all the time to represent time, the abundance of, the lack of, right? That clock specifically came from the servant's room of this house. We wanted to include the servant in this house, right? Because oftentimes they're not included. So that's the clock to honor her. Now, in other shows I've used pocket watches just because my grandfather was a Baptist preacher for 60 plus years and he always had that pocket watch. And when he passed a few years ago, it was the one thing I appealed to my grandmother to hold on to and to have. Also over here, you'll see small bowls and goblets meant to represent space and containers and time. Life is about juggling containers, right? Some seasons you feel you have a bigger bowl with which to hold things. And then some seasons you're just like, this is a teacup. I have no room. There's no room in the end for this. You'll see some candles in the back. You know, historically sacred spaces have the candles to represent light and the concept or the illusion of virtue. You know, that's largely up to your interpretation. But also too, you'll see branches of petrified wood. Those come from my travels. Those are some from Trinidad that I've had with me for over a year. Some are from New Orleans, from the swamps. You know, bringing in that home energy, that culture. And I think one of the really cool things is whenever I do an installation or a show, 80% of the show is true to the space, right? So even if we get invitations for this show to travel, the majority will travel, but there's a portion of it that I will create on site to honor that space, that venue, that people, that energy, right? But I also bring a few things from my travels and from past installations, because for me, that makes it feel like home for me as someone who is based in Denver, but is largely a nomadic artist. Additionally, I feel supported that my people are always with me, right? So this is a beautiful merger because you have pieces from people who lived in this house, who breathed this air, who walked these pathways, and we honor those amazing women during Women's History Month. But also you have pieces from my own personal experience that are filtered into this show as well. I also have little pieces of fabric from my travels. Whenever I travel, I ask people to offer fabric. And there are 3 of these in the entire show that represent me, my husband, and my daughter Zoe as a family. Unless you knew me, you would know that was a thing. But this also represents our ancestors. As I mentioned before, oftentimes people of color were not invited in, even though we were in the floorboards. And it's just my way of inviting us in, right? So you also have the drum. The drum is always a part of my installations. It's the rhythm, it's the heartbeat. Right now in this room right now, even though you may be sitting next to someone that you've never met, did you know if you sit for more than 30 minutes, automatically your heart is in sync with the person next to you? So we're likely all in community right now. You'll also see on this side, this is a tactile exhibit. While we do encourage persons to kind of let this be and respect it, when their school children come, starting tomorrow, there will be an opportunity for them to gently touch this. I'll also create a small mood board for them moving forward where they can feel the fabric. I do that for young ones so they can embrace the art. But I also do that because I want to make sure all my shows are accessible. As someone right now who is largely poised to be fully blind in about 3 years, I live with the reality of knowing that the work I create is an opportunity to include everyone. Which is why I shifted into fibro completely. If you know anything about my work, I started out in photography. Well, there aren't many low vision and blind people taking pictures. If they are, then they're extraordinary. I'd love to meet them. But I was given a gift in my diagnosis in knowing that I had a limited amount of time with which to shift processadome. So I decided to process that energy, to pray mightily, and to carve out space to try to create a practice that to honor that. Which is why moving forward now, this year, effective, all my shows are installations, period rooms, and they all deal with fabric. And I'm able to use the fabric and set that system up because I only use coarse fabrics that have history, have meaning. I photograph them, enlarge them, and then they're color-coded so I can return to them. It's almost like a really cool mad scientist like Fibro Lab situation, which sounds like a great podcast. So that's kind of where we are in this season. And I know once my vision goes, I'm very, I believe very strongly that there will be another opportunity for me to create in a different way that has yet to be revealed to me. But in the meantime, I have embraced the notion of surrender, and I am moving forward to create works that I'm sure everyone has seen and heard, and that you know that you always have community, even when you are completely alone. You're connected to your ancestors, even people who didn't even know your name or knew you would exist. They had hearts of hope. How do we know? You're here. And you're connected to the version of you that extends beyond. Over here, the flowers moon sweeping the door. It's meant to look as if the flowers are the answered prayers, coming down as rushing waves of joy, of encouragement, of support, almost creeping through the door. It is my intention that when you leave from here, that you will feel lighter, that you will feel supported, and that you will take a little bit of that love with you to wherever you call home or create a space. So at this time, I would like to answer any questions you have about the work, and you can go in any order. Just simply raise your hand, and we'll move from there. Yes?
I'm curious, how do you reach a point where you feel like it's complete to this point, you know? And, yeah.
Did they tell you I was in here yesterday? Like, no.
Or is there a completion point? I mean, I don't know. I'm just curious about that. Like,
no, I appreciate that. I think that creators just know. You know when something's like, no, we're missing something. I will say that the older I get, the better I get at that. There was a season where literally right before a show would happen, I would be like in sweatpants, like, give me just a minute, like pushing tendrils back, like greasy forehead, like all the things. And they're just like, people are literally coming. And then when we began to travel, I think that was a shift for us. When we began to travel, when we became parents, I just didn't have the same capacity, frankly. I didn't have the luxury of like waiting to the last minute. And also, I am very mindful in this season of exercising grace, not just with others, but with myself as well. And so that means doing things in a more methodical space. So this show was actually finished a week ago, which if you know creatives, you are right. Like that's unheard of, right? And then like 2 days ago, I told Sean, I was like, I don't know. I got some things, I'm ready to go back. And I don't think he was surprised at all. He was just like, all right, I'll meet you downstairs. So I really came back and brought like the libation bowl and like 2 or 3 things from our studio, but it just, I think you know, and I think with this one, we knew once we finished the door. And Shannon and me were just like, are we still going? Are we finished? I said, no, like it has, you feel it. Like this didn't, like an hour before we finished, we had the door, but this didn't even exist. I said, no, it can't stop at the door. It has to keep going. The door represents like the barriers. Like it's gotta go beyond the door, right? So I think you just feel it. Also too, there's a lot, for artists here, there's a lot of, you have to make room. You have to let things go. Because when you're doing a show, like I researched for 2 weeks for this show, you know, just so I would have the knowledge to do it justice and to create an installation that kind of flow with the house and then take over the house. So along with that, it's a lot of reading, it's a lot of podcasts, a lot of energy, a lot of things you have to reconcile, a lot of things you find out about the house. You know, if you're familiar with this house, then you know the families were living here during Sand Creek. And like, what can you say about Sand Creek? That doesn't make you want to go outside and like march now. So like, the reality of it is, you can't move forward and you can't release the weight, the chains of trauma without creating light, right? So to be in this house and to be in this space and to create something of any measure of value and not honor those beautiful Native sisters and brothers, those men, women, and children and elders that were slain on the watch of the people who lived in this house, who had the privilege of prayer closets, who founded orphanages, and did all those things, I think, in some way to kind of wash their hands of the situation, is doing a disservice. So when we got to this door, I said, not only does it have to extend, because there's this ceremonial reclaiming that we're doing, being the first installation done externally with this space, with this night that you're a part of, gratitude for you for that, I knew that we had to come back 2 days ago and bring a few reeds and branches from the greater Trinidad, Colorado area which is one of the oldest areas of Colorado. Because in my way, I was symbolically honoring those slain women, children, and elders. So for me, time, capacity, but when everyone on my beautiful checklist is honored, I'm done. I'm done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
From where I'm seated, I see shades of blue. Is that intentional with the shades of blue that I may be seeing?
You know I know your voice, Ken.
Yes, I do, yeah.
We love Ken. Ken is like family, extraordinary.
And I have another question, Paul.
Yeah, so, but you know that, everything with me is very intentional. Even in this season of limited vision. One, I just love blue, but also blue too. In my studies, graduated and just moving forward, I was always really focused on the capacity that the water has to heal us, to wash us, to renew us. Water is the only thing that I think that you can actually submerge yourself in and feel the weight of, and then come out of and feel different, feel new. And no matter where we've been blessed to travel, it's the same. It's the same. 2 years ago, we were in St. Croix for an artist residency. The elders, all the retired persons, will go early in the morning at 6 a.m. before the heat came out, right? Because the heat does come. And they would do yoga, and they would just bathe themselves in the water, and they'd be back in the house by 7 before the heat came. But it was just something so beautiful to see all these persons, different seasons, ages, experiences, just out there being led by the elders, going to the water. And for people of color, the water for us holds many keys. It may have been a watery grave if you were not going into slavery, if you decided, I consciously choose not to have this experience. I don't know what's beyond this, but this is pretty tough, so I'm out. It also means that you honor the truth of the matter, which is for generations and generations, beautiful people of color have lived on the water. They swam, they fished the waters. It was a part of their livelihood. So while I honor the experience of the place where I install work, I am always keenly mindful that my own personal experience and my heritage needs to be in this undercurrent of sorts to continue that theme of the water. So everything blue is intentionally blue, and it's a part of that reclaiming.
Other question is, did pique my interest when you mentioned they had Methodist roots. Did they worship locally?
They did. So a beautiful quick history on the house. It was built by the Evans, and Mr. Evans published the first paper in Colorado, Rocky Mountain News. I have to honestly tell you, when we first started doing this show, I had a sketch, and I was going to make a full dress out of newspaper to kind of reclaim it from him. Because if you know anything about him, respect, he wrote several articles actually kind of saying that, Sand Creek was justified. So I was like, this is my rejection of that. I'm gonna create this. And then I started making that dress, that newsprint, and I was done for it. And I was like, okay, maybe that's a different installation. And then he was in here for about 6 years or so, I believe. And then after that, you have the Evans family comes into the house, and they stayed until what year, Ken?
1981.
1981. So people were living in this house in 1981, and they would be continuously with their only family here. And you had 7 women that lived
Nine. That includes their servants.
that lived in this house. So this house is so appropriate that it be the center for Colorado women's history. Women lived in this house. They ran this house. They served through this house. And I do think that they did a lot of really cool civic things because they were in many ways kind of washing the sins of the fathers, in this space. So yeah, they were Methodists. They were deeply Methodist. And Ken is clergy, Methodist clergy, so that should appeal to them.
That would pique my interest.
Right. And when I found they were Methodists, I was like, I gotta call Ken. I'm pimping out a prayer closet. And all the people were Methodists. Yeah, they were. And they were also kind of in that first wave, because again, our country feels old. Our country is not that old in the grand scheme of things. You had that first kind of wave of Methodism coming over, from Europe. And it really took root, believe it or not so much in this case, but it took root because a lot of the early preachers were preaching outdoors. They went to the people, they went outside. So I'm always very interested at the contradictions that people gleefully sometimes walk in, right? And how we rationalize shifting something just to suit our needs, all of us. in different seasons until we connect with our awareness. Yeah, but they were deeply Methodist. Yes.
Too as well. The flowers, are they modeled after real flowers, or did you take the shape from the fabric to create a flower that in a shape? Was there any the basis for the flowers?
So they are modeled after real flowers, and two of the flowers, I want to say maybe about 70 about them, are modeled for roses. Just because historically, roses represent like classic Americana. You know, it's in imagery, it's in films, it's in all of the things. Also, too, several of the branches we have here, spread throughout the exhibit, came from a 100-year-old rose bush on this side of the property. All the things that rose bush has seen. You know, so we wanted to take into account that a lot of the brush, in addition to the pieces I brought from our studio and from different places of travel, came from this property. We were very intentional in pulling in things that happened to live and exist here. So the yarrow is from here, the rosebush, the trees are from here, because we wanted to also honor nature. And we did not want to minimize the fact that also nature is present to how we show up or how we fail to show up, right? And because we go back to dust and we are all connected, it's not them versus us, ever. It's always an extension of our community, of our ecosystem. So that was very intentional to create roses. Now I will say this, some of my fiber pieces look like roses, some look like gardenias, just because if you work with fabric, you know fabric kind of does what it wants to do. And I would have a perfect flower, and then the artist in me would say, go in deeper with shears, and then it would turn out to look like a lily of the valley, you know, on vacation. So yeah, the intention was to actually use flowers that could be found anywhere, but the actual pieces brought in were from the grounds. Yes.
And then my second question was, you say that you have clocks or in each of your installations. Is that a pressure of time for you? What does the clock represent for you?
You know, I don't feel any pressure of time, because I feel like when it's time for me to go home, I go home. But I think it's also why, if you know me, then you know I have a sense of urgency that came even before my diagnosis. I just always really felt, growing up in the South, seeing a lot of things at an early age, that like, you can't play. Like the illusion that you have all the time in the world is an illusion. And then when I got my diagnosis, I was operating from a different vantage point, because I knew that very soon, even though we don't know when, I wouldn't be able to see. So I wouldn't be able to see my daughter get older, see my husband, the people I care about, or be able to create or build upon a career that I've had and been building on for 20 years. So my sense of urgency is somewhat rooted in me because of how I was raised and what I saw, but also it's amplified by the fact that I know that I'm working with limited time. Now, I will offer that to those who are willing, is that you don't have to have a diagnosis, a tragic loss, or a shift of earth to feel that, because we all know people who are not here, who were literally here last year. Perfect health, gone. So like, my invitation at the end of each show is always to tell people, like, don't wait for a thing to show up. Like, if you're here, that's your thing. That's your thing. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, did I answer all the questions?
I may have one more, sorry. You said the door was up there.
Yes.
And they use that, the women use it as a prayer closet. They
Yes.
go behind and it's an actual prayer room.
Mm-hmm. So when all of this is removed, it's a space about as deep as from this red chair to probably about right here where I'm standing, and it completely closes. But if you're familiar with scripture, you know, Matthew 6:6, it encourages you. You know, historically people have been encouraged to pray, but to go into spaces. So you have this whole generation of people, or generations of people rather, who believe that prayer is a very private thing, a very intimate thing. So much so, I remember when Sean and I first got married, because I was raised Baptist, child, I would pray. I still pray all day, every day, out loud, all the things. I invite people to join or not join. It's all love, because I've studied all types of religions through my course of study. And because Sean was raised Catholic, he was just like, what? Why do I hear you? Like, what are we doing? Because he's really quiet and subdued. And when I met his mother, my mother-in-law, they too, it's very much a private thing. It's very much if I'm having a conversation or I'm appealing for someone, if someone is going through a bout of sickness or a tough time, it's my quiet time. And my vantage point and viewpoint was just like, I want people to know how much I believe and how much I care and how much, like I want all the things, right? And it really opened my eyes to the notion that, and the reality that everyone comes to it in their own way. So even if you have a different belief system, maybe prayer is not your thing. Maybe you are focusing on meditation, or sometimes you just get quiet and be still. Maybe you return to nature. Whatever you do to feel well is the thing to do. It's the thing to do. And yeah, that's my interpretation of what it means. But yeah, it's whatever you do to feel well, for sure. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? All right, well at this time, I would like to invite Susan back up. And then when Susan finishes, I want to take just 5 minutes to close us out, and I have a beautiful release ceremony I would like for you all to participate in. Okay.
Yeah. When we leave this room, we'll go back downstairs and enjoy yourself. There's cookies and something to drink. We really encourage you to come back and visit us. There will be another exhibit that Chloé will install in July, called the 12 Tablecloths, and that's for another conversation. But we're really working closely with Chloé in alignment with the values we have at History Colorado. It's very intentional work, especially in this home that we're taking. So I'm glad you're here to enjoy this with us. This installation will be here for a month, so please come back.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Susan. I appreciate you. 60 seconds on 12 tablecloths. I am recreating an antebellum style table. Yes. Because apparently there were 12 courses, typically for a meal. And as a female, I just could not understand me and the heat cooking 12 courses. So when I went to the museum outside of New Orleans, I was just like, I don't even know what to do with this. That was 3 years ago. So I literally a year later, it took me that long to process that I created an entire installation and just put it on the shelf. So July is going to be hot for many reasons, but really beautiful as we honor persons of color who worked in the heat, never a day off, to create a sense of quality of life when they had none. And the average person who was enslaved in Louisiana lived, if you lived to 30, you were considered elderly. Wow. So, yeah. But I do want to, if you allow yourself in this moment, just to gently close your eyes and get comfortable in your seat, and make sure you are supported. In this moment, I want you to think about that thing that you have been carrying. Maybe it's been keeping you up at night. Maybe, it runs through your mind during the day. Maybe it's a family member, a loved one, a season, or a situation. I want you to think about that thing. And I want you to think about how that thing has captured your energy and is limiting your capacity. And how lovingly, if that thing is for you to stay with, connect with, to sow into, that reciprocity is key. You are always supported in your decision, and that anything that is for you, if released, will always come back to you. So I want to offer you an invitation right now, in this moment, to leave something here at the altar, at the steps of the prayer closet, and do as so many people have done throughout history. If you will, just breathe deeply 5 times at your own pace, and as you exhale, just choose, if you're ready, to leave that thing here in this moment. And when you are ready, you can gently open your eyes. I want to thank you for your time and attention this evening. I am deeply grateful to have shared this experience with you. Please feel free to come back and view the same installation during the bold, beautiful daylight of the day. Feel free to take pictures. You can find us on Instagram at duplessis.art. or illuminates.com. And if I can serve or support you in any way, let me know. Leave from this place knowing that you are connected, you are lighter, and that you are in this space to surrender. It's not an option. The surrender will free you. And that the gift of prayer is never far away. Thank you very much.